the gods themselves with a small g. They are coming back during the apocalypse time.
Bone cracking hits to rip like the beaks of a griffin, with sharp pointy tips in the grip of a falcon, grasping with grappling talents and worn on medallions of battling, sitting in no man. So many masterfully sculpted renditions, artistically marvelous, monstrous visions, descriptions of possibly authentic dragon-like animals, fossilized mandibles gradually formed by the annual downpours and rainfalls, exposing mysterious samples. Examine examples like cylinder seals, revealing the secrets of serpents unveiled by ubiquitous snaps of a snapdragon. Sounds serendipitous, just like the epic of Gilgamesh. Several conspicuous mythical beasts can exist, and in fact they could actually be crossbreeds from angels who planted the seeds, non-indigenous demons hungry to breed. Their fathers who flocked in a pack of 200 deserters. These tyrants who plundered like pirates and lusted for flesh in a cycle of violence. They squandered like pigs in the mud of defiance. Abnormal like Dr. Moreau in his science. Monsters without any use of a latex appliance. A violent alliance of violent Goliaths, drowned and deluged by the flood into silence. Desirous delinquents, they lost their commission. Now Lucifer's legions, they turned into demons. Chained and blinded and bound in abyss, living with locusts deep in the pit. Facsimiles, angelic offspring, conspiracies, possibly aliens visiting, revealing sinister enemies, posing as saviors with remedies, history, mental capacities, cavities. Demons are grabbing our faculties, abducting sanity, offering new age mentalities, fraudulent phonies who mimic and imitate, based in satanic black magic, facilitate UFO sightings, debacle, debauchery, sorcery, portable forgeries, copy demonically forged by a fork-tongued mythology. Genesis 6 talks of Nephilim, vividly mentioning stories of alien babies and women apparently forced to endure hybrid pregnancy.
Make sense that when these guys fall to Earth, maybe they will come in spaceships to take you to the next step of evolution, to bring peace on Earth. We've got rid of all those Bible thumpers, those right-wing fundamentalist nutcases, and those hate mongers, and we've got rid of them. Now we're here to bring mankind to the next step of evolution.
Oh, my kids are already yelling, so it's great. I've asked them to not yell, but that's just how it goes. They forget. But welcome, guys. I'm going to call Gary here in a minute, and if you can think of questions to ask him on superheroes, that'll be awesome. And just to let you know, I may, and I'll let him know when I call him, I may have to shut my camera once in a while to move about because I'm getting old, right? The opposite of that would be demonic or death. So I'm getting old and I'm okay with it, but there's just certain things that I can't do that well anymore that cause me to have back pain. So I'm doing old lady back pain today. So I'm always going to be here, and I'll let Gary Wayne know the same thing when I call him, but I'm just letting you guys know twice because sometimes people don't come in until later. But I may have to make a grunting face or something and adjust how I'm sitting, and you don't need to see that. So with that, we're going to be talking the superheroes like the Nephilim and how it kind of created that. So I'm going to go ahead and give him a call. Let me make sure this is working, my display. Okay, so you're seeing a never-ending display because I'm going to put this on a call to Gary. So here we go. Calling. Hello. Hi. You can do video if you want. I have the video up of me. And if you want to do video, people can see you, but that's totally up to you.
I had it on. It picked up for some reason.
Okay.
Back.
Well,
Yeah,
there it is. There you are.
I was not trying not to avoid it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know you don't mind. I'm going to, quick introduction, everybody. This is Gary Wayne. He is a book author, of course, of this book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, which is a great book and a great read, and I recommend it because it's full of good information. And as Gary Wayne likes to call himself, he's a Christian contrarian, but very much a scholar. I would say scholar. That's the words I'm going to use, of biblical prophecy, mythology, and historical evidence leading towards the Bible. And so that's who Gary Wayne is in a quick nutshell, and most people know who I am. So welcome to the show, Gary.
Well, happy to be back again, and very much looking forward to what I think the audience might find a very interesting and kind of apropos subject, considering all the different things that we see out there in terms of entertainment things. So I think it's going to be a good conversation today.
Let me turn the microphone. Oh, I know why. I fixed it. So I had this is why we do this ahead of time sometimes, right? I fixed it so your sound should be great. Go ahead and just say a couple things, and we'll see if everybody's happy with that.
Are you hearing me now?
I can hear you fine. So hopefully that worked. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit more.
Excellent. Well, I'll just repeat what I had said, just a couple of minutes ago, just as a bit of a paraphrase, because I never remember exactly what I say, so I should pay better attention to myself. Anyway, so happy to be back on your show and to talking about a subject tonight that I think your audience will find very interesting and pretty apropos for the current times and the current entertainment industry and some of the things that maybe they perhaps haven't thought about in terms of making connections that they ought to be aware of. And tonight I think they're going to walk away with a lot more understanding of some significant genres in the entertainment today.
Well, of course, and it's something that I'm very interested in, and I know a lot of people will have questions about a lot of this stuff, and I think there might have already been some, but they're saying they can't hear you, and I don't know why. I gotta try to see if this is something on my end. I think it should be working now.
So do we want to reconnect?
Let me just check one more setting here, because I don't know why this wouldn't be working. They're just saying it's quiet, and I've turned it all the way up on my end.
Wow, and I've got terrific load, so I'm not sure why it's not.
Oh, they said it's fine now.
So
We fixed it.
Probably I should
I fixed it.
disconnect and let's try another hookup. A lot of times it's fine now? Okay.
Yep. So thanks for that. I'm sorry about it. I don't know. I'll go ahead. I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to be here. Please stop. I'm going to be here the whole time. But the audience might see me turn the camera dark because, like I was telling them, I'm getting old, which is, a good thing. But I hurt my back and I might have to adjust my seat and make a grunting face, and I didn't want to make everybody see that from time to time. So if my camera goes dark, everybody, I haven't left. I'm still sitting here. I'm probably just adjusting my body to be just a little bit more comfortable, so forgive me on that. So great. So I guess it's almost like, where do you usually start on this topic, Gary?
Just, was the thing and the topic that I began the book with. So good lead-in for a lot of things that are in the book. So, and also would like, if you're able to do it, if there's a chat room that wants questions in tonight, then let's do that as well, because I'm sure we're going to raise some curiosity. So when I started the book, I wanted to sort of ease people in and try and get a sense of relevance for some of the things I was going to talk about in the book and what is going on today. And we have
You guys cannot come out here playing that
superhero phenomena that has just exploded in the last 20 years. It was popular when I was growing up, but over the last 20 years, it's been like dominating everything in the movies and so much of the other entertainment, from television to books and things like that. And that's that superhero concept, whether it's X-Men or Superman or Batman. It's all has a connection in prehistory. So let's first begin with the word hero. And what hero is defined as in the ancient meaning is the offspring of the gods and a human female. So let's say Hercules or Atlas would be a hero. And so Hercules is the son of Zeus and another human female. Atlas is the offspring of Poseidon and Clyto, and is considered a hero, and Titans, so earthly Titans when they're called Titans, but typically heroes, just as some of the modern translations of Genesis 6:4 will say mighty ones, it might say heroes of renown or heroes of old or something to that effect. And again, that's connecting them in a way that we need to be aware of, because that's what the sons of God are in Genesis 6:1 through verse 4, are the fallen angels who go to the human females and create these heroes or mighty ones, men of fame, as the renown is another way of translating that. It goes back to the word Shem, which is fame, and could be even translated as infamy, depending on the application. And I think infamy would be a little bit more accurate in this case. And what's interesting about that is they are also known as demigods. And demigods were defined in ancientology as, again, the offspring of a god and a human female. So you start to see some of these things start to tie in. And after these superheroes of the ancient world died, because their bodies weren't permitted to continue with their immortality that they were originally created with, and God stops that in Genesis 6:3, their bodies are going to die in the physical world, but their spirits aren't permitted to go to sleep. They're not permitted to go into heaven. And so afterwards, these demons, as they become known to us as, have nowhere to go except for roam the dry places of the earth, as Jesus talks about, and they thirst for a body to interact in the world. And they are very, very upset that they don't have a body anymore. And what they would do right after their is they would haunt the local realm that they governed over, because they became the leaders of those communities as demigods and worshipped as representatives of the gods on earth. And the people would have to do rituals to appease these demigods, and those are some of the devil gods that are talked about in the Bible, not to be confused with the fallen angels, because again, there's two separate levels of godhood here. These are the earthly gods, ones that were, the offspring of the angels and the human females, and that was called hero worship. And it was also done similarly in India and in China as worship. Not worship, but trying to do protection from what they would call vagabond ghost demons, after the spirits of former rulers. And again, this mythos goes wide. So this is the history that is behind the caricatures that form the superhero known today. So you have these beings that are bigger, stronger, faster, can fly, greater strength, all sorts of other enhanced abilities that go off in 1,000 different directions. I'm
Are you there?
getting a lot of extra noise in here, but I'll. And so I'm here. There was just a loud bunch of noises that were coming in. So I just was getting back to my sort of train of thought. So we were talking about these demigods that were that the superheroes that have all sorts of different features as we know it as it continues to expand in the genre, but it all goes back to this concept of the ancient Nephilim. And I don't think a lot of people kind of understand that. And so to answer the question that you asked is, I think that's the best place to start. And then we can start to break in the relationships between the superheroes. And I'll probably start simple with somebody like Superman and work into Batman and work into some other ones and just sort of show people some of those connections. So I'm not sure whether you have any comments or questions on that, Aaron, but feel free to jump in right about now.
Well, that's why I kind of figured I'd say, where do you usually start? Because, okay, just to admit, I don't really have a lot of experience with superhero comic book stuff, except for I've looked into Venom because I looked into third strand DNA and things like that. So I like.
We're going to touch on him a little bit as well. So
okay.
yeah. So
I don't have anywhere to jump in yet because I just don't have a lot of knowledge. So I just love hearing how much you know.
Yeah, and ask questions anytime that you want to jump in. So, and you know, Venom is part of this one category that I would call serpent kinds of superheroes that go back to a serpent Nephilim. And you'll find that there's 4 or 5 major groups of these superheroes. So you have ones that have a serpentine basis. You have ones that have a dog or a wolf basis. You have one that has a bird or a falcon or a raven type basis. You have ones that have a cat or a lion type basis. And then you have ones that would be what you would be calling an everyman hero, that, you know, the Fantastic Four or maybe the X-Men, although they can get into some of the allegories as well, where it's more of a DNA manipulation with enhanced features of some sort. And there's also a small grouping of scorpion or an arachnids in terms of the source of it, whether they're scorpions or they're spiders. So just sort of lay that sort of category down so that when we talked about, when you had mentioned Venom, that he would go back to that serpentine group. But I'm going to start with Superman because he's one of the first ones that is going to lead us into this age of superheroes. And you have 3 groups of companies that are going to start in the 1930s that are going to generate a lot of this information. And things are going to be built on the mythoses that they build in the 1930s. So you have DC Comics, for example, that starts up in 1935, and you know they got people like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, and you also have Action Comics, which you know were formed in 1938, and then you also have Marvel Comics, which was formed in 1939. And so this is where most of these stories come from, and they have like a renaissance that's sort of ongoing and additions to the mythos. So we're going to start with Superman. And Superman is, you know, he's a superhuman. He's almost a Messiah type of figure, but not in the Messiah type of figure that would be Jesus as in the Word of God, but more into an Antichrist or a Nephilim type of Messiah as he's made out to be. And, you know, we know his name as Superman and we know his name as Clark Kent. But he has another name from the planet Krypton, which is again loaded with allegories of things that go into the occult in terms of what Krypton and crypto means and things like that, and numerologies and stuff like that, and sort of a hidden world, a lost world. We won't go into that aspect of it. I want to stick to the characteristics of the Superman aspect. So it's got
an S that is rather stylized, and it's like a serpent, if you have a good look at it. Some people also believe that the crest that it's on, in some forms it's a triangle, in some forms it is a diamond, but most people say it's an allegory or taciturn backdrop of an upside-down pyramid. So it's an interesting thing. I don't know about that, and it's also got some yellow in the background, and that's also meaning knowledge and stuff like that. But that S is snake-like, and so Superman's going to be part of the serpent kind of superheroes. But in the 1930s, they're not getting overly complicated with adding a lot of these features. And so when he flies, he doesn't have those seraphim wings. He has a cape instead of the wings. And later superheroes will have the wings, and we'll cover some of those off. And a seraphim angel is a serpent-faced angel that works before the altar of God, and thought to be the watchers that mated with human females in Genesis 6:1-4 that we mentioned earlier. So the seraphim were a serpentine or a dragon type of flying angel, dragon, serpent, and called seraphim after what they looked like. And so that's very similar to the Nagas of the Indian continent, or Quetzalcoatl or Viracocha of the Quiché Maya and the Incas and the Aztecs, and all the different names, and known also to us as a plumed serpent or a feathered serpent. And where this really starts to connect back in some of the allegories of Superman is, as I mentioned earlier, Clark Kent isn't his real name and Superman isn't his real name. It's actually Jor-El, and he's son of Kal-El. And so the back half of that word is El, and El in the Bible is Hebrew for a god or an angel in the singular form. And so he's from the house of El. And so again, you start to pile up all of these allegories just on the Superman logo. And if you go into the pantheons of the Middle East and try and figure out who El is, he is a specific morbid, lustful god of the Canaanite pantheon, the arch enemies of Israel. And so his son is Baal. And what you learn by understanding El and Baal is the Al in Baal could just as easily be El or Il, because it's just a transliteration from a different language in terms of whether it's going to be El, Il, Al, or Ilu, and a few other transliterations. So Baal and of El. So Baal also has a son who is thought to be Molech, but we don't get his connection in there, but we just get the son of a god, which is Baal. And it's very interesting that Superman is this Antichrist type of superhero with a Nephilim offspring aspect to it. And so those allegories aren't in there for no reason. And so when you start to look at some of the stories that start to come out of Superman and some of the things that they're talking about, you can start to peel back the onion a little bit as to where those stories are going with these allegories that are coming out of prehistory. And what they're doing is they're foreshadowing what's going to happen in the end time, and they're also telling us their history, their belief system, and their genealogies when they allegorize some of these characters. So I'm going to move over to another one, and I'll come back to some more examples within the serpent end in a few minutes. But Batman is another very, very interesting superhero. And when we talk about Batman, he is a character that, uses more technology than having those superhuman talents. So he's a little bit unique, but he's still built on the same characterization out of prehistory. In this case, it comes out of the Xibalba classification of Nephilim creatures out of the Popol Vuh, and as a subgroup of the Xibalba. Now, the Xibalba were kind of an owl or a raven-faced vampire-type demigod that lived in the underworld, and Camazotz and the House of Camazotz is a subdivision of that, but they have a little bit different look. And that translation for Camazotz is the House of the Bat. And so they had a bat description as and again, if somebody wants to get a hold of me after the show, I can send you quotations out of the Popol Vuh in the description so that people know that what I'm talking about. And robin or red robin would be, you know, a lighter form than the exact sort of bird identification that I would put with the owl-like Xibalba. But again, his Batman's, you know, sidekick is still based on the bird group of Nephilim. So that's an interesting one, and I thought it was good to kind of throw that out. And now I'm going to move over into the lion group, as in the lion men of Gad and the lion men of Moab and the Alu out of Sumerian, which were these lion men, warriors, and Nephilim. And interesting, again, once you see the pictures of these things, very, very interesting in terms of what they look. They're the offspring of a lion group of gods. Let's put it that way. So they might look at Black Panther as one who is the offspring of Bast. And that's, again, part of the Egyptian mythology. And Black Panther was a movie that was out. You also have other gods in Egypt like Mahis, and then you have Nergal that are over in the Sumerian pantheon. And so anything that's got to do with a cat, I'll come back to more of those examples in a few minutes, they'll go back to a god that looks like a lion. So when we talk about the bird ones, you'd be looking for a god like the Tengu gods or the Anunnaki gods as they're pictured in Sumerian mythology. So they'll have more of that falcon look, or Horus would be another example as a falcon or a raven type look. And then you have the wolf or the dog type of superhero. Not nearly as popular, but you might have Timber Wolf or Man Wolf or Wolverine, which would be a takeoff of the X-Men, which comes out of that one other sort of group. And you've got dog gods like Anubis and Wawawet and Dua Mutaf out of the Egyptian mythology, who also produce dog warriors or dog Nephilim. And so you also have a Greek mythology that goes back to Zeus again, who transforms King Lycaon for not following and doing what he wants him to do into a werewolf and a changeling quality that also will include all of his family. And that tends to be the start of a parallel type of dog or a wolf god that is very, very similar to the dog Nephilim of old. Now, they're a little bit different because they have a little bit different type of creation. And anything that has to do with like a howling god would be part of this group of gods that would be producing Nephilim that looked like them. And again, why we would have some of these dog-like or wolf-like superheroes. And then, as I said, the last category, which I call the everyman hero, which might include things like Spider-Man, although he might go into the arachnid section as well, or the Fantastic Four. These ones are like what happens in prehistory with the DNA manipulation, because we get all of these other fantastic beings, whether it's Chimera or King Habata of the Cedar Forest, that have multiple things that are going on. And typically these heroes are created from that sort of DNA manipulation. And if people aren't familiar with our work or the shows that we did recently, the technology and the knowledge had reached a level in the antediluvian world that was greater than what we have today. And that's why they were able to build, cities like Machu Picchu or the pyramids or all of these lost and recently found underground cities and cities under the oceans that, has a technology built into them with sacred geometry and celestial alignments and workmanship that we can't do with weights that we can't do properly today. And so it's thought that the whole world was made corrupt before the flood, and actually we get that account in the flood story starting in Genesis 6, right after the Nephilim narrative, and into Genesis 7 and 8. You have the whole world being corrupt. And corrupt is the Hebrew word for, shakath that it derives from, and that means totally decayed, destroyed, ruined, from its first place. And so all of the plant genomes of all of the animals would have been either infiltrated by all of the copulation and the spread of these demigods into the human aspect, and also what was going on with DNA manipulation into the animal world and the genome world, so that the whole world was corrupt, which is probably why God chose the animals to go to the ark and led them to the ark to repopulate the earth after the flood, because he knew which ones were not corrupted. So we have one sort of category that's kind of left here before I let you jump in and I start digging into some of these other characters. And we won't spend a ton of time on each one of them, but the next category is the scorpion or the arachnids. And so you got like Scorpion Man and Scorpion and variations of this type of superhero. And I think that goes back to another group of monsters that are created by the gods to protect the parent gods and to keep the lower gods in order. And if people aren't familiar with parent gods and lower gods, I'll explain it fairly quickly here. So in the Greek mythology that most people are familiar with, you have the primordial deities that precede the Olympic gods. So the Olympic gods, whether it's Zeus or Hera or Demeter or Athena or Apollo, these are all gods that are offspring of the parent gods. And the primordial gods in Greek mythology would be like Gaia, Kronos, Oceanus, Rhea, gods like that. And there was 12 of the primordial gods. You have a similar setup all over the world. And when we talked about El and Baal would be that second tier of gods. And in Egypt, you have what they call the Ogdoad gods, which are essentially mostly kind of reptilian or snake-like, but then you've got some other gods in there like Anubis and some other ones that have different sort of looks to them. And so the lower gods would be, and the second tier gods would be gods like Osiris and Isis. So if you've got an understanding of that, then when Tiamat, who is part of the parent gods, would be alongside of An, who would be parent gods for lower gods in the Sumerian tradition like Enki or Enlil and so on and so forth, Tiamat creates the Akrababalu and the Gerdabalu, two different names probably referring to the same type of god. And you have these scorpion gods show up all over the world, Egyptian mythology, the Kisha Maya again in the Popol Vuh. And these gods were initially created in the tradition of protecting the parent gods from the lower gods, who in most cases rebel against the parent gods, by the way, and to also guard the pathways to the underworld and to guard the sun temples after the parent god who made this, in this case Tiamat that we're talking about, dies. And they had these gods, these Akrababalu scorpion gods had the powers to destroy the earth, which is how powerful that they were. And what's interesting about that is you get an image of Abaddon and Apollyon in Revelation 9, who's going to lead these scorpion beings out of the abyss. And a lot of people are wondering what those beings are. Again, I've got a terrific little document on this. If you get a hold of me, and the pictures are absolutely spectacular on the Facebook link. You got to see them as they're pictured on the ancient reliefs. They look identical to the descriptions of these beings that are coming out of the abyss in Revelation 9. So I thought I would kind of just stop there again and let you in. I'm sure you've probably got a couple questions, Aaron. If not, I'll just keep going.
Yeah, so Joe Atencio was asking about Superman's dad and the meaning behind his dad.
Well, he's the father, right? So he would be from the house of El, and you know, there is a genealogy that goes to another level, even above that. So that's basically taking the genealogy back to the primordial gods above Kal-El, who is the father of Jor-El or Clark Kent.
Okay.
Did I answer the question, or did I miss the mark on that?
No, I think so, because I think you kind of covered it too, but I just didn't know if I just wanted to make sure he felt like we covered it, because he asked. Brooke had two questions. She said, are you aware of biotechnology used on MK Ultra people today that gives superpowers?
Well, and that sort of goes, yeah, I mean, that goes to what they're preparing us for, particularly with the X-Men, that there will be that kind of beings that they are making for weapons and for weapons of war. And I think that answers the question in a lot of cases as to what are these beings further on in Revelation 9, not the ones who come out of the abyss that are scorpions and sting with their tails, but these other creatures that are in the 200 million man war that are exactly the same as the same descriptions in Joel 1 and 2 that are taking place in that war, that I also think is the Gog and Magog war, understanding that Gog and Magog were in Greek mythology the offspring of Iapetus or Poseidon, depending on which version that you're reading, and so likely Nephilim as well. And I think what's going on here is that the technology is advancing to the level that we're catching up to the antediluvian epoch that I talked about a few minutes ago, and that we're going to see a convergence into whether or not you have a marriage of transhumanism with biotechnology or cross, I guess, creating different kinds of human with animals that would also inject some other sort of, as an MK Ultra injecting additional strength and works with them, so that when we see these beings riding these powerful horses, or these beings that have the face of a min, and all of a sudden you got underneath them all these other different sort of looks and wings and things, I think that starts to answer what they're developing for the end time wars. And I say wars as in the first war, which is the counterfeit Armageddon, and then the Armageddon War.
Okay. So Brooke had another question. And I think this, you see this a lot with celebrities. They'll do the sign of the risen Osiris with their arms crossed. And what do you, are they trying to resurrect Osiris, or is he, like, do they understand the tears themselves, do you think? Or what do you know about the resurrection of Osiris?
Well, that's not a resurrection. That's the first thing. And what happens with Osiris is very, very similar to a lot of other gods in other pantheons, and based on the same sort of principle. And so Osiris is killed. So I mean, I don't know how you kill an immortal, and then this seems to be more of a demigod story where you have the spirit of the Nephilim that rises back up because it doesn't go to sleep. So when you see the same type of things, whether it's Tammuz or other sort of resurrection type stories. These are not what is going on with what happens with Jesus. This is the bodiless spirit of a demon that is, has left the body. It has not resurrected. And again, you don't see Osiris coming around. He went to the Dog Star system, so Sirius. And so it has, to me, when I look at that, I see so many details that are different that it's got nothing to do with resurrection. This is just a demon spirit.
Okay. And Joe said you answered just fine for Superman's dad. Ben's has the question, is Thor a fallen angel or a Nephilim?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, and I would say fallen angel more than Nephilim. So he, he's again probably second tier god, whereas Loki would be more of the demigod character. So Thor, to me, would be one of the fallen angels coming back, and again, that starts to answer some of the weaponry that he has.
Yeah, okay. Which is like the big hammer, and does he do lightning too?
Yeah, so, and storm god, and so again, very similar to Baal and at that level. So son of Odin, okay. Second tier god, seems to be where he fits in. And again, we're going to have fallen angels in the end time that are going to be working with the Nephilim. So, and they're the fathers of these superheroes. So it makes sense that they're going to be back together. And we know that we're going to have them back because they're going to be released out of the abyss in Revelation 9. We already know that not all the angels are in there, only the impassioned ones and the worst of the ones are. And so you're going to have other fallen angels becoming more active as we get closer to the last 7 years. And then you have all of the rebellious angels, including Satan, thrown to the earth at the midpoint of the last 7 years. And you see these beings in terms of fallen angels in different characteristics in Isaiah 13 and Isaiah 34. So when you're getting these dragons and howling gods and wild beasts and satyrs and things, that's what's being referenced in Isaiah 13, which happens towards more of the midpoint. And then Isaiah 34 is at the end time. So again, you have that big war as you get to the middle of the last 7 years, and then you have the Armageddon War, and they're dancing about the destruction of the earth and humanity, just as I think they might have destroyed the world between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Not doctrine for me, but I think it makes more sense that the world became void and then was renewed.
Right. Well, we'll have to. That'll be like the next show, because that's where I start to have just fun questions. I find it really interesting.
Yeah, that's a topic in itself. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned you were going to talk about Venom stuff a little later. So
I'll just continue then, and if you get some more.
Yeah. That's perfect.
Yes, where we're gonna get into. So, yeah. And just before I do that, it's interesting that in about 2009, Walt Disney bought up all of these comic strips, and that's why there was, a part of the big push that continued with these movies. And Walt Disney is a Rosicrucian and a Freemason, and he's the one who does all of the cartoons and things about fairies and things. And so it makes sense that the writers are receiving information or are initiated into this knowledge to be able to write about this, because the information has to come from somewhere. So when you look at who controls Hollywood, understand that this is an area there where the secret societies and the polytheist religions focus on heavily is entertainment and literature, so that they can prepare people for the end time. So serpent superheroes other than Superman. So you've got Bushmasters, who looks like a cobra or a snake. And you have the Serpent Society, and you can Google some of these and you can get pictures up on it. You've got the Red Serpent, and you've got King Hiss, and you've got Cobra and King Cobra and Cobra Khan and Copperhead and Serpento and Another one called Nagnaj, which is very interesting because that goes right back into sort of the Naga etymology, understanding that Naga is the genus word for cobra and the Sanskrit word for cobra, and pronounced Naj as opposed to a hard G on that. So if some of those serpents superheroes start to make sense, relate that back to the Nagas, the feathered or plumed serpents, the dragon creator gods out of China, and the seraphim angels out of the Bible, and you start to get some interesting connections there. And Venom would be one of those. And so, like I say, just Google it. You'll get that serpentine look, where Superman was created kind of first, and they didn't progress him that far, but they've got all of the serpent imagery that falls on the crest. So some of the dog heroes, and again, some of these people may or may not be aware of, and I won't certainly list all of them, but you've got like Man-Wolf and Timber-Wolf and Wolverine and Wolfbane. That's all part of the wolf part of the parallel aspect of it. You've got Superman's dog called Crypto, Super Dog as he's called. You've got Underdog out of the cartoons. You've got Ace the Bat Dog in with Camazotz. You've got Rex the Wonder Dog. You've got Hyper Dog. And you got Dynamite, that is the sidekick of Blue Falcon, which is part of the bird group. And again, so anything that is from the howling gods, the jackal gods, the Anubis gods, those are the gods that you want to sort of connect things back. And you get a connection back to the dog aspect in the Bible to a certain degree, where, Goliath is talking to David about, what am I, a dog? And it seems like the dogs weren't quite as high up as the serpent or the Rephaim and the Nephilim type of giants back then, the way they frowned on the dogs. But you have, a Neba's god that's mentioned in the Bible, and he's the barking dog and a barker. And he's worshipped by the Avim, who is part of the Rephaim that's listed in Deuteronomy 2, because Avim, Horim, Emin are all vernacular names for the Rephaim. And so it's interesting, we do have a dog god that we can look back to, and we also have some Avims that are actually worshiping this dog god. And you also have an interesting connection with two Midian kings in the book of Judges, whose name are Zeb and Orab. Orab goes back to the word raven, and which is part of the bird dog line, and Zeb is it means wolf in Hebrew. And it's interesting that you have these Rephaim type of kings with these heraldic names back to these type of Nephilim and back to certain kinds of gods. Just as Caleb, who was a mercenary, just as the dog Nephilim were more mercenaries, goes back to the Hebrew word for dog. Caleb is the Hebrew word for dog, and he was a Kenizzite. So whether or not he goes back to the Kenizzites that are listed in Genesis 15 or from Kenaz, we're not really told, but he was certainly a strong warrior, and maybe he was given that as a name. And what's interesting about the offspring of Anubis, whose glyph is a jackal, by the way, his offspring lived in I want to make sure I don't butcher the word, Sinopolis or Lycopolis, which is Werewolf City and Dog City. And his offspring lived in this great city in Egypt, and then his children wandered and migrated around the world. And just as we get a Tengu variation of the dog gods over in China, we also get a lot of history talking about these dog warriors and dog Nephilim. So like in Hesiod, for example, he recorded these dog Nephilim being created by some Greek gods, which were Hemocines or Hemokines, depending on how you want to pronounce that. And Herodotus also talks about the Marmotae or the Berbers, which are the same line. And Pliny from the Roman Empire, he writes about it and confirms Herodotus' versions, but he actually describes these dog Nephilim as being 8 cubits tall. So depending on whether or not you're doing a cubit at 18 inches or 21 inches, that's 12 to 14 feet tall in Pliny's time. And so Africa, India, China is where these beings were also recorded, whether or not it's by Cestius or Marco Polo or in the Chinese accounts. So again, a lot to the dog Nephilim. And the reason why I spent a little bit more time on the dog, because you have this dog mythos that's been really growing sort of hot and heavy in the North American culture of the last number of years. Moving over towards the bird Nephilim to give a few more of the superheroes. We talked about Batman and Camazotz and the Zabalba. So these are the Anunnaki or the Tengu gods. And if you want to Google Tengu, Tengu, you're going to get these pictures that are over in Japan, China, and other places. And they're a lot like the Thunderbirds, but they created a race of gods or demigods that were warriors and a priest class. And over in Japan, that's where the martial arts and the samurai tradition comes from. And again, it's amazing, these pictures in terms of what they look like, in terms of that bird look, and how they match up with what the Anunnaki look like on the reliefs that you get coming out of ancient Sumeria. But Falcon would be another superhero that would fall under that category. And of course, Horus was a falcon god, same classification. You've got Hawkman and Hawk Girl, and Hawkman really looks like a Tengu, and he carries a samurai sword in a lot of his depictions. We talked about Red Robin. You have Hawk and Dove, and you have Nighthawk, who has an Anunnaki depiction on his chest and seraphim wings or flying wings on Anunnaki.
Okay, so I think we're back live. What happened is some kind of crash and boom and bang, and I'm grateful that we should hopefully be able to get back on. Looks like I'm moving along here, but I just don't see the chat yet. But until, I think it'll probably come back up. So could you just, we are live and it's going. So just where was the last thing you left off with that we were saying?
I was before I was moving on. I was saying that for people who would like, more information on these kinds of prehistory Nephilim and the mythos that sort of goes with this and the sources on, I've got documents on all of them. So whether or not you want, documents on the dog Nephilim, I have a 3-part series. I have a 2-part series on serpent gods and serpent Nephilim. I have one on the lion men. I have one on the Tengu birdmen. I have a Camazotz document. I have several documents. There's another one I was going to mention, the Akrabamaloo for the beings that walk out of Revelation 9. I have a document on that. Go to my website, Genesis 6 Conspiracy. So Genesis 6, the number 6 conspiracy.com. On there's an email, and just say if I want the Dogman one or the Lineman ones, or I want all your superhero ones that you were talking about on the show that the superheroes are based on, I'll email you those documents, and they'll have the Facebook link as well as the sources in the document. So you can check out the sources, and then you can go over and look at some of the pictures, which are absolutely spectacular.
And
so
I do have your website up on this page just so that anyone looking for that will see that it is right under the box where your image is being shown. So it is there.
Okay. Okay. And the last category that we left off on, and hopefully, the audience has rejoined us. If not, I can go back over if somebody wants it. I was just going to cover off some of the superheroes in the Lion superheroes that come from the gods, like Nergal out of Sumeria, or Bast for the Black Panther, Mahi, Nirashima, and others. Sekhmet would be another one out of Egypt. So Catwoman, Catman, Black Panther, Lion King would come out of that same understanding. Aslan in the Lewis series of Narnia books that would be based on Nirashima in particular as an incarnation. And in this case, that would be an incarnation of it's either Vishnu or Shiva. So be careful with, and explain well to your kids some of the fairy tales and things that you're reading them. Griffin, Red Lion would be another one. And so they're well covered off in terms of those kinds of Nephilim. And then, as I talked about, whether or not it's Iron Man or a lot of the X-Men, you have those types of beings that are being reproduced through DNA manipulation or some other format. Again, prehistorical as what we've talked about. And just as you have Scorpion is coming from those Krabomalu, the Revelation 9 beasts that I think they are, as also part of that arachnid or scorpion superhero. And then I wanted to make another connection, just because I've talked about so much of this, and there's one particular superhero, if I can put them in that category, just as Batman is, again, kind of that original, not quite as advanced on some of those superheroes, but a different kind of superhero. You have some of his nemesis that are coming up in all of the Batman narratives, and there's one that is sort of the king of them, or the leader, or the most prominent, which is the Joker, and we've seen a lot of movies on that. And the Joker's comes out of the same sort of understanding, but through the understanding that these are representatives of, what's the best way of saying this, is that if you see masks that are in the theater, and the Chinese masks, which would be the most spectacular ones, these are representing a being in underneath. So a demon possessing a body is sort of the imagery, and or a fallen angel avataring a body. And it's the same to do with the Day of the Dead and putting the white on the face. And that moves you into, where I'm going with this, into the clowns and the gestures, which come out of that same concept and ideology in the trickster spirit aspect of the type of demon spirits and angelic spirits that are out there. And in that aspect, you have the court jesters who have these white painted faces like you see on playing cards and these hats. This is an imagery of a magi who's hiding in plain sight in the court, but he's like a joker, right? And it's the job of the jester to do things and to advise and to make the king laugh. And the king doesn't laugh, or he doesn't like what the jester is advising on. What they used to do was they would slit the mouth open of the jester. Now overlay that onto the Joker, and that's the imagery that they're portraying. Jeez. And it's important to understand these things because, again, as I talked about in terms of the Day of the Dead and the festival of All Hallows Eve, this also goes back to so much of the characters that people dress up as on Halloween, which includes superheroes and other characters that are directly related. So whether or not they're a ghost, demon spirit, a vampire, which is on the Dracula, again on the serpentine aspect, and I think we talked about that in another show. You also have goblins, which are part of the superheroes, like in one of the nemesis characters of Spider-Man. I think there's 2 goblins in that one, but that's part of the fairy mythos, which is the matriarchal bloodline, as opposed to the dragon bloodline of the vampires, or the raven bloodline. The dragon is the male allegory for the bloodlines. Owl and fairy are the female bloodlines. So you can see a lot of fairies and goblins and things that people are going to dress up as. And you have all sorts of superheroes that they're going to emulate. The witches and the wizards are the priests and the priestesses of the religion. The clowns we've talked about, werewolves we've talked about, zombies, demons. These are all about celebration of the Nephilim and the demon spirits. And in the tradition of Halloween, on All Hallows Eve, they come through portals on All Hallows Eve and out into the world. And that's why you have all of these rituals and things to try and protect people from these demon spirits and or to scare them away. So much of what we have that we're immersed in is about the Nephilim and their parents, and the history, the genealogies, and the allegories of that absolutely dominate our entertainment, our literature, and as you take that back into history, it's a common MO, because it's the Rosicrucians that are setting up these literary societies to transmit these kinds of imageries and teach people about it, to keep it front and center as preparation for the end time. So you can look at the Spear Shaker Society by Bacon, or the Helmet Society. Spear Shaker is thought to be the name where Shakespeare takes his name from, and or Bacon is Shakespeare, which is the another theory. I have a couple of great documents on Bacon if somebody wants a document on Bacon. But that's the modern MO, and these are the writers that are also going to be establishing the English language, which is used for the King James Version Bible. But you also have the Inkling Society, which is another sort of society that is a Rosicrucian-sponsored Golden Dawn Society, where people like Tolkien and Lewis participated, and MacDonald and others were all involved there. And that goes back to a very long tradition of these societies that were writing the Grail stories and anything along those lines of, whether it's Robin Hood, they all carry the same type of genealogies and history, just as you have the science fiction genre or the horror genre also carrying all of those types of allegories and genealogies and histories and belief system. So it's absolutely everywhere in terms of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, it almost makes you say, I even asked somebody the other day, I'm like, what do I even talk to my kids about, or let them watch or read? Or you get to this point where it just seems like it's all so corrupt. I'm like, I don't even, and just today they were watching something, I said, this is a demonic show. I can tell that this kid has a demonic spirit, and he's got demonic characters all around him. It's totally demonic.
Yep. You've got shows on there that's got the Church of the Gibberim, and you got a Satan series on. I mean, it is so much come out of the sort of closet and in your face. It's absolutely amazing, and it's all religious. It's just polytheist religion, and at the same time, anything that's Christian or biblical stories, they're either trying to change those stories so it's not scriptural anymore, or they won't permit them or let them be shown in great numbers in the movie theaters, and certainly not a lot gets on television. That's for sure. Unless it's a manipulated form that you have to be very careful of, because they tend to insert manipulations and corruptions into what they're putting on about the Bible or the characters in the Bible.
Well, yeah, the people that own PureFlix, the wife or the gal that owns it, I don't know if she owns it or if her husband does, but she's a Christian for yoga fanatic. But Ron had a question that says, how do we know which angels are in the pit? Or, yeah, is it the pit or the abyss? In the abyss.
In the abyss. Well, they're known as both. So, well, we know the impassioned ones are in there, and we don't get a lot of names of the angels that are listed. In fact, we only get Abaddon and Apollyon, which isn't a name, it's a title. So biblically, we don't get any of the names other than maybe Azazel, which is the leader of the host of angels that are put into the abyss, as First Enoch talks about. And Azazel is the scapegoat Hebrew word for the second goat on the Day of Atonement that is sacrificed. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And I've got a great document on Azazel, Abaddon, Apollyon, how they're the same angel, because Abaddon and Apollyon, as I said, they're a title meaning destroyer, just as Shiva is a destroyer god. And you don't have an EL on there. And so that's not the name of the angel, that's a title. And I think it's likely Azazel that is the king of the abyss. And I make connections to Azazel, Abaddon, Apollyon, and to the son of perdition, which is Antichrist, and connect all of that together in a nice document. The only two angels we get in the Bible's name, with their names, are Gabriel and Michael. And those are good angels, and part of likely 7, as Revelation 8 lists 7 angels around the throne with the Ophanim, the cherubim, and the seraphim. And so the names, you know, if you're looking for the names of the angels in the abyss, you essentially have to go to sources like First Enoch that will give you other names, whether it's Barakiel, would be in there. There are some ones that aren't maybe not listed in there, like Ariel, which means the line of God, which is maybe the angel as we would know the name biblically, because Ariel as a Hebrew word is in the book, and it's the root for lion, and the El means the lion of God. And in the occult, he is a lion type of angel, and could be, you know, the parent or part of the class of angels that created the linemen and who the linemen superheroes are. So we don't get a lot of names. And even in the old Apocrypha, which was originally part of the King James Version Bible, we only get 2 more of those 7 that might be around that are archangels, as Michael is an archangel, and Gabriel, as they define that at the Strong's, is also an archangel. And the other 2 names are Raphael and Uriel, that comes out of the Apocrypha. And so people don't know what I'm talking about. You can get like the Access Bible or the Good News Bible, or just, you know, search for the Bible with the original King James Version Apocrypha. There's modern translations available as well, like the Access Bible. And it's an interesting read. We have to make sure that we understand that they're Apocrypha. They're no longer part of the canon. But I don't see a whole lot that goes astray in those ones that used to be in the original King James Version Bible. But that's all we get. So we need to be very careful in terms of names of angels and not take it at face value that, you know, we're given those correct names. And if God wanted those names to be known to us, he probably would have made them more readily available to us. But again, I think those names have been changed into different names in different languages as they come down the various pantheons, even though they may be all referring to the same type of god, as in the destroyer god, like Shiva, Azazel, Abaddon, Apollyon, for example.
Okay, so Ben's asked a question about ancient Norse gods, and that in Ragnarok, I don't know if that's a movie or a game, they split into 2 and are fighting each other. Do you know who is on which side when the ancient Norse gods split and fight each other according to Ragnarok?
Yeah, that's typical polytheist dualism, good versus evil. I'll explain it this way before I explain that. So you have, let's say with the Greek end of it, you have Hercules, who fights for Zeus and is considered a good guy, and you have all of these offspring of Poseidon like Atlas and Kronos and other ones, not to be confused with the parent god, who fight against Hercules. And so you have good versus evil all throughout, and that's part of that religion. Even within the religion, you've got white magic and black magic.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what's being portrayed. You know, have good witches and bad witches, and that's what's being portrayed even within their religion, and that is exactly what is going on when you're looking at Ragnarok, and that it is not like the good angels of God and versus them, because they all are part of the pantheon. They have all rebelled against God. They're just fighting internally. And again, that's not unusual because they're all power hungry.
Yeah, that makes sense, because, you know, you were talking about the families, and that they're all got an antichrist, and they're all hoping to be the family that brings the one up, and that just makes perfect sense, because it's not just one cohesive plan. They fight with each other.
Yeah, there can only be one at the end time, when you have Antichrist crowned as king of the world, and his dynasty that would go forward in their new millennium, their age of Atlantis, their new age, will have offspring and will be the ruling class. So there'll be still the other bloodlines and the nobility that are on the outer edges of the central power, but they won't be the one. And again, you have the Highlander series and movies that was on, and I might be showing my age again, but they,
you know, I know that movie very well.
They express that, and, you know, they take the heads and then suck in the people's energy, just as, which is just an allegory for drinking blood, and it's called a quickening.
Yeah.
And of course, that quickening term is drawn out of the Bible when it talks about Jesus and his quickening. And they allegorize that into their belief system, but what they're talking about with the Highlanders is more of the fairy tradition and the quickening there, not the quickening that's talked about in the Bible.
As soon as you said there can be only one, that's exactly what I thought of. I grew up knowing the Highlander, liking the Highlander, and even kind of went back to it recently, and I was like, gosh, this is so full of symbolism. But Rockman had the question, who is Iron Fist and Doctor Strange in the scheme of these characters' comic books?
I'm not quite familiar with the name Iron Fist. Is that the Dark Lord of the Universe?
I don't know. I just know he's on... boy, this is... How do I explain this? Because I'm not even good at this myself.
Okay.
They did a TV show with him on it, and he's trained in martial arts, and he's got the big, strong iron fist that he can, like, just punch the crap out of everything.
Okay. Well, again, he'd be one of the rebellious ones and probably a Nephilim type character. In Doctor Strange, you have two forces. And you may have some infighting within the one that are fighting for their freedom and Earth as that separate realm, and to negotiate that treaty against the Dark Lord of the Universe, or the Black Lord, or whatever they call him. And that is an allegory for the God of the Bible. And so the story is an allegory of that rebellion that they want humans to have in the end time. And it's an allegory that's reflecting what Lucifer, or Satan, as I would prefer to call him, the devil, did in prehistory when he rebelled against God and the loyal angels, and that is why this is his realm as the prince of the earth, the god of this world, who is trying to win the earth as a separate realm, and the heavens that are associated around it, so that he can set himself up to be like God in his own realm. And that's what that whole allegory is about in Doctor Strange, is actually getting that realm, which is the earth, which Satan is the god of.
Man, you're enlightening me on so much. Like I said, I know very little of some of these characters, and all I know is just from the small amount of research I've done. So Wanderer is in the channel, and are you familiar with the QAnon following? Wander
Not
asks,
intimately, but I am aware of them.
okay, Wander asks if you could tell us if you think QAnon is a trap of the enemy, or something really out there trying to help save America.
Yeah, yeah. I am a wait and see on that. You know, there seem to be, you know, aligned with Trump to a certain degree, but I'm not convinced yet that that side is not globalist in nature. I think it matches up well with the Trump movement, who wants a bigger role for America in the New World Order, just as Putin does, but they're not against the New World Order. And so you see them sort of working towards globalism, but not in a manner that the traditional globalists who have been trying to diminish the U.S. and the U.S.'s role in a way to bring about the New World Order. What Q and President Trump might be doing is still saying we want this world empire. We just want to be the dominant player in it.
Yeah, and
I don't know for sure. I'm not against them. I'm waiting to see is all, because the globalists are working both sides of the fence. So, and the reason why I say that is, and I know Trump ran against the globalists like the Bushes in the last election. The Bushes were, you know, they're essentially the same side of the coin as the left-wing globalists. They were all working for the New World Order, and you know, you had both Bush Sr. and Bush Jr. giving speeches on 1,000 points of light. 1,000 points of light represents the spark of the divine, the spark of the Nephilim seed that's been dispersed around the world, that they need to bring that together, the 1,000 points of light, so that they can evolve into godhood, and they require the universal religion and the world government to be able to do that. So when I talk about the globalists, I understand there's globalists on both sides of the fences, and we need to understand that.
Yeah, I'll give a quick 2 cents. I think there's a lot of New Age kind of deception hiding underneath the surface. And even though Q quoted the full armor of God, it talks about, you know, kind of this world peace and salvation, and, you know, just, I think it's another way that people will turn a blind eye, thinking that it's been done. I don't have to do anything. It got done for me.
Yep.
Thanks for Q.
Yep.
Thanks Trump. You saved the world, and now I can sit back and turn a blind eye to all this horrible crime again.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm certainly not against anything that is pushing back the dark side of the left. So I don't mind that. But again, I want to see where things eventually move about. And we'll see. But I don't see a whole lot other than maybe a slowing down and a repositioning of assembling the New World Order going on. So I'm not convinced that it's a force working totally against the forces of this world. I'm a wait and see on that.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those, like, I'd be happy to be wrong if QAnon and Trump are saving children out of tunnels. By gosh, I hope I'm wrong about how I feel about what's really going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have another question for you. Ron asked about, he didn't ask, he just said it was a question, so I hope I get it right. He said, does Star Wars equal panentheism? I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I said, do you mean pantheism or panentheism? And he says with the panentheism.
Well, I mean, you know, pantheism is, you know, pan, all, and theism, religion. So, yeah, it's polytheism. There's no doubt about it. And if he's making a denunciation of Pan the god, as in a satyr type of god, a Bacchus type of god, a Cernunnos, Cern god, as out of the Etruscan, and other Baphomet and other classifications, I think, you know what, it's probably that too. So I understand that he's got an extra vowel in there, if I understood the enunciation right. So he may be referring to that, but essentially it's the same belief system. But Azazel being degraded to a goat god, which a satyr is, I think would be leading this as a big proponent and as being the one who comes, you know, out of the abyss in the end time, and is the god that Antichrist, who is I think is going to be utilizing his power and honoring the God of forces. And again, that's that document I was talking about earlier that connects it all. And it's a bit of an etymological Hebrew trail and Greek trail in terms of the original words, but it's a fascinating study.
Yeah, he says, I think it's the spark Christ consciousness, the God within you. I guess that's the panentheism.
Yes. Well, that makes sense too, because again, if I'm correct that this is Azazel is a bad, I think when when Antichrist receives a mortal head wound, he's going to avatar Satan, and that's why, I mean, not avatar Satan, avatar Antichrist, and that's why Antichrist is going to honor the God of forces, because Azazel is the one who taught weapons and war to humans and Nephilim in the antediluvian world, and is the one who destroyed the world. So when we talk about Christ consciousness, that's what they're talking about. So Christ consciousness is a god like Vishnu, who had an incarnation into Buddha, and several other incarnations, well over 10 as I recall. And the new Buddha is called Lord Maitreya and or the Antichrist in the Eastern tradition. So they fully expect an avatar to take effect, a born human, to be that Christ consciousness in the end time, just as Aslan is modeled after Narasimha, and Narasimha is a incarnation of the destroyer god Shiva, and Aslan is the character that Lewis portrays as a Christ character, Christ conscious character, that he's preparing people to accept what the Antichrist is going to reveal, who I believe will be, avatared by the destroyer god Abadnapal and Azazel Shiva.
So, okay, boy, I'm sure I could come up with some questions. So I have one question, and it's only specific to Venom because it's research I've done. And when I looked at Venom, what you see is that Venom has this black goo way as a symbiote, and the black goo being possibly programmable matter, as I've heard it from Anthony Patch and stuff like that. And you look at the character has cancer, and then the symbiote comes to take him over, and he kind of has to give the character permission, and then it cures his cancer. But most of the time, these creatures would not work in this kind of symbiotic relationship. Is that right? Or they're kind of from an evil planet or something? Anyway, I'm curious about what you know about that.
Well, it's certainly a category that you get into in terms of how the spirit world, both demons and fallen angels, work with human beings, as opposed to just having a shell or a clone being. So, you have an avatar effect that we just talked about, that's a symbiotic relationship. And just as Satan enters Judas to help him get over and have the courage to betray Jesus, and it literally says Satan enters him, and I think Satan may have entered Nakash, the serpent, to betray Eve in the garden, and then Adam. And so you have, because it certainly wasn't the Nakash who lost his arms or his legs or his wings or his speech or his intelligence, and Nakash is a serpent, and Satan is partially serpent, as he's described in Revelation 12, also cherubim and archangel as well. But that's another rabbit hole. So I think when we look at this concept, that's part of it. But that is, as with Vishnu or with Narasimha, that's a symbiotic relationship where they provide knowledge. And it's similar to the division that happens with the shamans, who again wear that white pale face, and they are taking in this trickster spirit. Sometimes it is a symbiotic relationship, and sometimes it isn't. So sometimes you get those faces that come out like on those Chinese masks, and sometimes it doesn't. So again, I think there's the demon spirit that isn't symbiotic, like in demon possession. and it's suppressing the host. And then you have that avatar relationship that we're being brainwashed with. And I understand there's going to be a whole new series of avatar type of movies and entertainment about to come out that enter into the human bodies, but it's because they're being invited in by the human. Now, maybe if you invite in the demon spirit, maybe there's more of a symbiotic relationship, but typically that is not a symbiotic relationship, whereas the avatar effect tends to be.
Okay, well, Benz has another question. He says, the Blue Avians whose following is nicknamed Blue Oyster Cult, do you know about that?
No, I don't, but interesting name, Blue Avians. So you maybe have him throw out a little bit more information on that?
Yeah, if he wants to type something more about that, that'd be... Yeah, and I think what you make is such a great point. Of course, like sometimes they're going to work together and sometimes they're not. I think that's sometimes the promise of the future for people is like, oh, it's going to... They're not going to say it's demonic, right? But they're going to say you can get superpowers, or you can cure your cancer, or you can have this knowledge, like you said plenty of times. And that's how I think people will say, yes, give me that, Mark. It won't just be for hunger or I don't think. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I agree, and that's exactly there's this offer of what you can get out of the deal, and that's why the shamans and people in the old traditional styles of yoga and meditation and things like that will go into a trance-like state so that they can make contact with those beings in the spirit world. But the problem is you don't know who you're opening yourself up to, because once you have done that, you've created a doorway into you. And and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with thinking about things, but don't get into that state where you are actually doing a polytheist ritual and opening the door to demons and fallen angels.
Okay, so Ben says autocorrect interfered. He said he meant blue chicken cult, which is totally different than the blue oyster cult, but something related to the Tengu, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah. So when he said avian, I knew he was talking about birds. And the Tengu and the chicken, well, I don't think they're actually chickens. I think it's more of a hawk-like look. But it's interesting that you have the blue, because the blue is a significant color in the occult, as in blue pseudo blue bloods, and I think what it's doing is just sort of portraying a pure bloodline back to at least their belief system, to those Tengu gods, or it's just a cult that is just taking on that as those kind of gods, whether they're the Tengu or the Anunnaki, that they're worshiping directly. But I don't know anything about them. But when I look at what they use in terms of their words and their imagery, because that taciturn language in their iconology is so very, very, very important. And a lot of people will confuse what looks to be like a chicken with what could be an actual hawk or an eagle or a vulture or something like that, that is all sort of related into that belief system. And there's probably a few different sects of that bird angel and bird cult. So,
well, we're coming up on the 1.5 hour mark, which is what we did for time last time, if that works for you.
It works for me. If there's one last question or so, or if there's anything out there, then I'd answer that. But yeah, so hopefully I communicated well enough tonight to give people a basis to start understanding some of the language that is being communicated.
Oh, you no doubt communicated well. I just had to fix the volume so people could hear you better. They could hear you, just not very well. So it'll start out a little bit quiet for some, but whatever. Most people stick it through and they understand, especially in this time with everybody being online. A lot of people are struggling. Even I saw mainstream media people were having streaming issues and stuff. So what I would ask you is, since I have you here, I would take any of that document information on all of this stuff.
I'll send that all. I will send all of that to you, and I'll make sure I remember it, because I know in the last show or two we did, you were interested in a couple, and I couldn't remember which ones you were interested in. So these ones I know I will send those to you, and I'll also leave people to think about coats of arms. And, if you look at whether or not it's the British coat of arms or a family's coat of arms, that has taciturn imagery very similar to what we've been talking about tonight. And those are the royal bloodlines. That's the elite. And coat of arms will show their houses that they're from, their bloodlines that they're from, and they'll have dragons on there, they'll have lions on there, they'll have eagles on there, which is part of the bird one, they'll have dogs on there, they'll have fleur-de-lis on there, they'll have all sorts, they'll have double crosses on some of them, they'll have all sorts of things like wings as in seraphim. When you start looking at coats of arms or the coat of arms or a crest of an organization, you'll start to connect some of the dots on how pervasive these bloodlines are that remain in our societies, and how powerful these people actually are to this day. And you'll start to understand some of the sort of splits in terms of the family bloodlines, because even though they may be scion and there may be some iconology in there, they are still from a baseline bloodline that is very important to them, so that they can say, I come from this original Rephaim or Nephilim and this God. It's where they fit in the hierarchy of the bloodlines.
Well, I am excited to look over it, because what I do is it's like see one, do one, teach one in a way. Like I can read your book, or I can read these documents, and then when hearing you talk about it, or vice versa, however it goes, it starts to click after I hear it and read it and learn about it. And so, because I was listening to you also on the Endeavor Freedom doing, I even threw out a question. I will admit I didn't know that they took questions beforehand, so I just kept waiting for my question and waiting for my question. And then I hear Justin finally go, I think it's Justin, whatever. He goes, oh, well, we'll finally get to the live questions. And I'm like, what? Oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah, he collects them so that they make sure they've got enough. And so when I get told a little bit before how many questions there might be, and I'll have a quick scan of them. Don't have much time to look at them, but what I'm trying to do is figure out, can I get through those questions and at least leave 20 minutes to half an hour to answer some of the live questions.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a challenge sometimes.
I don't know if you got to mine yet, because I still have to listen to it. I've gotten almost all the way through it, so I don't know if you ever did. It was about werewolves and vampires, so I'll have to throw that on the next Ask Me Anything.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so anyway, again, I always am happy to pray, or if you being a guest want to pray, it's 100% up to you, however you'd like to do this tonight.
I'll take it on tonight.
I love that.
Father in heaven, we thank you for helping us to get together and to commune and to communicate information and hopefully learn from each other and take the information, understand it, and then communicate it to others so that we can help other people not to be deceived, help to prepare, and just to answer questions and to help take away some doubt for some people. So we very much appreciate you being with us and allowing us and helping us to be able to do this. And I also want to pray and mark and celebrate that today is the day of Passover, the day of the true crucifixion, and just want to thank our Redeemer for going through the horrible atonement process as the Lamb of God as we move into the resurrection celebrations of Christianity. And we just want to thank him for who he is and what he did and what he has done for us. And we pray these things then in the name of our Savior, the Word Jesus, who now sits at your right-hand side and testifies to you for us and for all of the saints. And also in the name of the Holy Spirit, in your great and holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that great prayer. I always appreciate when other people are willing to pray, but certainly not necessary, because I sure love it too. So thanks for doing that. And yes, it is Passover, so what a blessing to have another year we get to celebrate these things on earth and bring more souls to Jesus.
Amen.
So thanks for being here again, Gary. And of course, I know that you'll come back, right?
I will. Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
You have a blessed weekend. Happy Easter.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. Hey, if you're still here, guys, I want to do a quick raffle because that is something I do, and I need to be doing it anyway. So if anyone asks, I can say, oh, you got to skip to the very end of the video, and I do the raffle. So I got to pull everything up because I didn't really quite prepare ahead of time, but that's okay. You guys are patient. If you don't want to stay for the raffle, of course you don't have to. Let's see, window capture. There we go. So I do the gold and silver raffles, as you guys probably know. If you're new, I do gold and silver raffles, and so I have one that's just filled, and I put a new one up, and I'm going to show you guys that real quick. And man, isn't Gary Wayne just a blessing of information? He has so much to offer in information. It's just fantastic. It blows my mind in like the best way possible. I absolutely love it. I know you guys totally agree. But right here I have these 10 spots for, it's 1 bar and 1 Kennedy, which it does say that in the description. So it's these 10 spots are the ones that are going to get raffled right here. And if you're on this, so keep an eye out for a minute. Doc Michael, you're on there. And I'm glad you could pop in, Bubba. Good to see you. Thanks for the questions, you guys. Thanks so much. Just wanted to let you know I have a new one. These are only $5 a spot. You get 2 dimes of pure silver and an ounce of pure silver. And these are pictures of the actual silver I own and I raffle. This is the reason this looks like 2, and I shouldn't do this, I guess. But I was just trying to show the front and the back of these. But anyway, this is Kennedy and a silver bar, and this is 2 dimes and a silver round. So there's 10 spots available, $5 a spot. It says on here how to use Cash App, or if you really want to send money, I have a P.O. box because I can't do PayPal or any of that stuff anymore. It just doesn't let me. So just thanks for the patience and sticking out the beginning. I don't know, Joe, you got to check in on the regular basis. I can try to message you when I have new ones. But anyway, there's a new one up there, 2 dimes and an ounce. But here we go. Good luck to these wonderful not 10 people, but people who got 10 spots. And drum roll. Woo! Number 8. That is Doc Michael. So I hope you see that. I hope you got to see that was you. And I really love you guys. You have no idea. You are my light in the storm. You are my calm. Jesus is that first. But you guys, I can bounce ideas off of you and talk to you. And when I'm nervous and afraid, you pray for me. So I'm not afraid that much, but sometimes lately I have been. Pray for my back. It's pretty bad. I'm getting older. These things happen. You guys have probably had it happen to you, and you know it can be very debilitating and frustrating to have your back hurting. So if you can think of it, pray for me in that. And anyway, a whole new raffle, Joe. So get in on it. Congratulations, Doc. And you know, I appreciate you guys. I'll certainly pray for you if you have anything you need prayer for. And you know, it is Easter weekend coming up. It is the Passover. And what a blessing to be a part of this in a way that I've never been a part of it before. So anyway, I'm glad that we have this new community of people. It means so much to me to have you guys here. And if you think I'm just saying that, I'm not just saying it. You guys really mean a lot. I've been demonetized. No more super chats for me, but I don't care that much. It just isn't that. I don't want to be partnered with YouTube anymore. I don't want to be partnered with PayPal. So that's fine with me. Let's remember Jesus, because that's who this is for. And I love you guys, and you have a blessed night and a blessed weekend. I'll be live again, but you know, I just appreciate you, and I'll see you when I see ya. Bless you guys. Good night.
Lights loop around, causing sonar blinks. The circle sings, the church bells ring. Settled in the saddle as the battle rises. Chrome pieces tapped and the leathers tightened. Roots to leaves, toes to fingers. Blood still spills, questions linger.
Search for salvation. Nations rise against nations. Time bombs tick. Invasion. Lives flash before eyes. Mushroom cloud surprise. Flies off the carcass. Frogs find targets. Stench wave rises. Causes mirages. Birthrights pass to the center of the earth. And your speech is slurred. Cause your tongue's in the dirt. Money worth less than the twigs and the branches. Logs worth more. No more matches.
We bow down cause we dwell in this temple. Trapped by the serpent, knowing good from evil. Pushing camels through the eyes of the needle. People of the earth, are you prepared for the sequel? We bow down cause we dwell in this temple. Trapped by the serpent, knowing good from evil. We're pushing camels through the eyes of a needle. People of the earth, are you prepared for the sequel?
Water from the mud, strain between teeth. Borders on the skin, gums start to bleed. Prophesied locusts, darkness, hopeless, no rest left. Farthest from closest, sands from Sahara's, baldings hairless, missing, useless, radiation toothless. Drastic changes to their physical features. Eating apples, giving worms to the teachers. Left to get your last breath, to get your first step. Dropped in the bottomless pit. Drink from the goblet, all yours hogged. Mildew, molded, rusted, rotted. Searchlight search for the blind since birth. Like a hobbit in the earth, gave their rings to the church. Channel to the chainless, chain like Siamese. Million man army, watch the Chinese.
We bow down cause we dwell in this temple. Trapped by the serpent, knowing good from evil. Pushing camels through the eyes of a needle. People of the earth, are you prepared for the sequel? We bow down cause we dwell in this temple. Trapped by the serpent, knowing good from evil. We're pushing camels through the eyes of a needle. People of the earth, are you prepared for the sequel?